Part 1. After years of hearing stories of problems with HOAs and having no tolerance for busybodies ourselves, my wife and I were both solidly in agreement that we would never purchase a home in an HOA. When we finally did find a house and purchased it, we knew for a fact that we were not in an HOA. However, just behind us, we learned there was a, not really, HOA. About a week after we moved in, there was a knock on the door. One of the neighbors behind us, announcing that she was president of the HOA and welcoming us to the neighborhood. Seemed civil enough, but we asked, "What HOA?" "Oh, we're behind you. The home behind yours is where the HOA starts." "Och, that's nice. Nice to meet you." Just general pleasantries. We were hopeful. We were shocked, even. Someone associated with the management of an HOA that wasn't a complete busybody psychopath. How wrong we were. The way our lot was, there was a sliver of green space between our property line and the sidewalk in a somewhat triangular shape. The street ran west-southwest. Our property line ran due east-west. So there was a wedge of land there. We'd always been told that this belonged to the HOA, yada yada. No big deal. Just meant we didn't have to deal with the upkeep of this land. Now that this setup is all in place, it's time to start the story of how we got the, not really an, HOA dissolved. We had a couple of trees in our yard, literally on the property line, so we took responsibility for taking care of these things. They're massive asterisk. They're also a pain in the butt, incredibly dense/heavy, and because of the way the limbs grow, they're prone to splitting and dropping limbs. There was a huge limb that extended way out into the street adjacent to the green space owned by the HOA. This thing was a major risk of dropping and severely injuring/killing someone. We didn't want that on our conscience or our insurance, and so we decided to take that limb down entirely, as well as clean out a lot of the deadwood in the two trees. Hired an arborist. They came out, did their thing. $1,400 later, we were left with some decent-sized rounds that we were going to move over the next weekend. I was out of town the first weekend after we removed the limb. I should note that the wood was neatly stacked in the green space on the bark dust, out of everyone's way, and in no way a hazard or eyesore. Enter the shrieking harpy, president of the HOA. My wife had stepped out the door the day I had left on my trip, and she pulls up into our driveway, rolls down the window, and starts yelling at my wife. "You need to move that wood now. That's private property or TW of DHEHOA. Move it now." My wife is not a confrontational type. She's also somewhat petite, and tried to explain to the harpy that I was out of town and that we would be moving it as soon as I got back in town the next weekend. Nope, not good enough. She shrieks at my wife some more, and my wife ends up grabbing the wheelbarrow and somehow moves this stack of rounds, some of them weighed close to 100 ulls, around the fence, up our driveway, and into the backyard. She was pissed. So was I. We knew where the harpy lived, so when I got back I went over to talk to her and explained that I was rather displeased in how she treated my wife. Didn't pound on the door, wasn't aggressive or anything. They wouldn't answer the door. Cowards. We knew they were home. This left us with a bit of a displeased taste in our mouth. The next spring, the hedge that is planted outside of our fence line, well, it wasn't maintained very well and pushed over 2 sections of our wooden fence. So I emailed the harpy and explained that their hedge had damaged our fence. "It's not our hedge." It's growing in your green space." "That's not our green space." "Wait, what? Then why the censored did you decide to screech at my wife last summer when we had the wood stacked there?" Silence. Well, at that point I fixed the fence so our dog wouldn't escape, after pruning the laurel back sufficiently that it wouldn't damage the fence again, and started making some phone calls. I contacted the county and ended up speaking to about 7 different departments in order to figure out who actually owned that strip of land. After probably 2 weeks of trying to find the right people to talk to, I got to the roads division. The green space was marked as part of the right-of-way for the road, and therefore no one actually owned that space. So I can chop down that ugly overgrown hedge that's encroaching on the sidewalk and knocking down my fence. Yep, says the kind gentleman from the roads division. As an aside, he asked, you mentioned something about there being an HOA associated with the plots to the east of your property. Yeah. Well, part of what took me so long to get an answer for you is that it turns out there is no HOA registered with the county there. So we were looking in the wrong place entirely. Wait, there's no HOA there? No, hasn't ever been one since that subdivision was built. Ha. Interesting. And a plot was hatched. We had befriended a couple of people within the neighborhood behind us, and they were rather fed up with Ms. President of the HOA and her antics. She was the typical busybody, bullying anyone she didn't like, and apparently for the last 10 years or so had been collecting HOA dues from everyone in the neighborhood to the tune of $300/year. There were 36 homes in the HOA, right around $100,000 in dues. For a non-existent HOA, with no real maintenance. Oh, they hosted an annual block party, potluck style. They pulled weeds from the green space on a volunteer basis. So I did what any red-blooded American would do. I got 36 envelopes, 36 stamps, and printed off 36 copies of a letter with my findings from the county that there was not now, nor ever had been for the recorded history of the subdivision, any HOA, neighborhood association, or any similar organization, and that they collectively had paid in excess of $100,000 in dues over that time to a non-existent entity, plus any fines the non-existent HOA had decided to levy. The neighbors, in turn, did exactly what any red-blooded American would do. They sued the hell out of her for every penny they paid over the last 10 years. 2. And there's no longer an HOA behind us. Egate. Forgot to mention this. In all the digging into this mess, we learned she's a real estate agent. I figure I'll wait until she pisses me off again and report this whole mess to the state's real estate licensing board. *evil grin *. Edit to the edit. As others have pointed out, this needs to be reported to the licensing board. We'll look into that process. Edit of the edit to the edit. I have sent an initial email to my state's real estate licensing board, real estate agency, and will post any updates as things develop. I did look her up in the licensing system. Apparently she's licensed as a principal broker for her agency. This should get interesting. Edit the 4th. And this should be interesting. Her license is up for renewal at the end of this month. This should put one hell of a speed bump in that process. *evil grin*. Regarding the criminal charges, since I wasn't a victim of the fraud, that's not something I can pursue. However, I spoke with my friend who was one of her victims, and he and his wife are talking to other people they trust about coming together and seeking criminal charges. Part 2. Today, my wife and I had dinner with our friends who were among the victims of this psycho. And I learned a lot. Definitely more than I should have. I learned a lot about the lawsuit that was filed when I sent out the letters revealing that there was no HOA. There was, in fact, a settlement to make the lawsuit go away. I will say this, the Harpy got a good lawyer. Good lawyer. One of the terms of the settlement was that the total amount remain undisclosed, but our friends confirmed that they were made whole. Another part of the settlement was a pretty stringent non-disclosure agreement. I'm gonna have to start pretty far back in this mess, because it explains a lot about how this all went down. The subdivision that Harpy lives in was built back in 2000, and it turns out that at the time the subdivision was built, she was the first one to buy in this brand new neighborhood. The developer had actually planned to set up an HOA the correct way, but because of delays in construction and selling the homes, they never actually set it up. Based on one of the comments below and a glance at the relevant state law, this is apparently bad information that was passed on to me. That didn't stop Ms. Harpy, though. Not at all. So as soon as the next owners moved in, she reached out to them. "Hi. Welcome to the neighborhood. We are setting up a neighborhood association, a voluntary HOA, if you will. That way we can take care of the common areas and keep property values up." The usual excuses behind an HOA. Well, after the first 5 to 6 houses were bought and the owners moved in and agreed to this voluntary HOA, well, the pitch changed. It went from a neighborhood association to just a straight, "Hey, welcome to the neighborhood. I'm the president of the HOA. Nice to meet you." Most people went along with it. They figured they had missed something in the disclosures or in the listing or something. But this was a brand spanking new subdivision. And at the time, you couldn't find a brand new subdivision that didn't have an HOA. There were a few people that did in fact pay attention. When called on it, she would change her pitch back to the, "Well, it's not really an HOA. It's more a voluntary neighborhood association. But we do have some rules we've all agreed to," that it turns out she wrote all on her own. "And we do collect a small amount of money. Just $25 a month. That's not unreasonable, is it? Just to keep up the common areas, and the rules help keep everyone's property values up." All of that came to light during the depositions and testimony in this lawsuit. And she sold them on it. Everyone signed the rules. She even called them CC and Rs, with the argument that this gave them a certain legal weight to be able to enforce the rules, either under the guise of the HOA or the neighborhood association. By the time all the properties were initially sold, it was roughly 2 to 1, those that thought it was an HOA, and those that thought it was just a voluntary association. And as people sold and new owners moved in, well, the HOA pitch just got easier to sell, to the point that at the time of the lawsuit, it was somewhere between 3 to 1 and 4 to 1. As testimony was wrapping up, her attorney put forward a proposed settlement. I was able to find out from my neighbor that in this proposed settlement, the only people that would be, in the legal jargon, made whole were the ones that signed on under the impression that it was a legitimate HOA. Her attorney successfully argued to the judge that the people who signed up under the voluntary neighborhood association were not actually defrauded and therefore couldn't be a part of the settlement. That really pissed off those people. Because of the timing of the whole house of cards tumbling down around her, she had sufficient equity in her house that she was able to refinance her mortgage and pay the settlement amount. So she had to pay a lot of people back out of her own pocket, losing that equity that she had built up over the last 10 years. I'm guessing that her husband was not in on the scam, as he was not one of the named parties in the suit, and he filed for divorce in the middle of the lawsuit. As for how he didn't know, no clue. Maybe she just had him convinced that her commissions from real estate sales were just that good. I have no idea what the terms of the divorce were, but it was apparently rather acrimonious. Our friends more than once heard shouting matches from the Harpy's house as they were out walking the neighborhood. So hopefully that clarifies how she was able to sucker people in. Our friends were some of those that were convinced that it was a legitimate HOA, and they told us that she was so smooth, so convincing, that they didn't doubt it for a minute. At least that meant that they were made whole, even though they couldn't legally disclose how much they got back. Now for more recent happenings. One of the things we talked about tonight was our neighbors going to the district attorney and pursuing criminal charges. Well, they talked to the DA's office this morning, and apparently the statute of limitations has passed. For a crime like this, even though it would be a felony-level charge, the statute of limitations is only 3 years for that type of crime. But I passed on to them the idea of reporting her to the IRS. Since they were among those who lost money, I figure it's only fair that they get the reward if there is one. They both got a rather gleeful look at that idea. So yeah, that should be interesting. One of the reasons that I said the Harpy got a good lawyer was that one of the terms of the non-disclosure agreement was that if they signed on to the settlement, They agreed not to report her to any professional board or any licensing agency. So she obviously had concerns that something like this might possibly, just maybe, perhaps have an impact on her license as a real estate agent. Too bad for her that I wasn't part of that settlement, because after my initial email to the state real estate agency, I got a response back this morning, and after a couple of more emails back and forth, I was interviewed over the phone by the head of the Professional Standards Division. They appeared to be very interested to hear what I had to say. I gave a recorded statement on the grounds that it would remain confidential. Don't want her trying to make my life a living hell. And at dinner tonight, I learned that our friends have a pretty good friendship with several of the people that were not paid off in the settlement agreement, since they signed up under the Voluntary Neighborhood Association. The ones her lawyer insisted were not defrauded, and therefore couldn't be part of the settlement, which means they also are not covered under that pesky little non-disclosure agreement. Before I started writing this update, I emailed the names and contact information for 3 of those owners who still live in the neighborhood to the head of the Professional Standards Division. Because while I had to deal with her craziness and general pain in the attitude, I didn't actually lose any money, but actual victims of her scam. I imagine their testimony will carry quite a bit more weight with professional standards. I also, solely for their convenience, included the state court case number for the lawsuit. Who knows, maybe they can see the records of the lawsuit and the terms of the settlement since they are a state agency. That, kind Redditors, brings us up to today. If I hear more updates, which hopefully I will through my friends, I will gladly share them here, and I'll happily answer any questions I can. Part 3. And now for Part 3, ladies and gentlemen. A couple of new characters have been introduced. Government agencies have gotten involved. My friend and neighbor texted me this afternoon, saying only, "Call me." As soon as I was able to, I gave him a call, and he could barely stop chuckling. He caught me up a bit. After we'd talked the other evening, he'd started talking to some of the people in the neighborhood. And it turns out that Ms. Harpy of the Not Really an HOA is apparently kind of a slow learner. Because in the last 3 years, while she hasn't tried to bilk anyone else out of their money, some of the newer owners in the neighborhood were being told that there was still a neighborhood association, and she kept trying to enforce arbitrary rules on people, except everyone had heard about her antics, and promptly told her to get bent. So if anything, her nonsense has actually created a more cohesive neighborhood. Everyone is united in hating her. But that's not the reason he was chuckling. He was chuckling because he'd just gotten off the phone with an IRS agent. Now, normally, that's not your expected reaction when speaking to anyone from the government with the word agent attached to their title in any way. But no. He was chuckling after he spent over an hour on the phone detailing everything he knew about her dealings as president of the HOA, as well as providing contact info for quite a few others in the neighborhood who knew what had happened over the years. I really hope I get to hear more about what happens with the IRS. As if that wasn't enough good news, I popped over to the State Real Estate Licensing Board website. I've been checking it every day since I spoke to the head of professional standards, and saw this. https://i.imgur.com/4spau.chick. Sorry I had to redact the hell out of that, but I really want to try to keep this entertaining for you all here while maintaining anonymity. If I may direct your attention to the section titled License Information, the column titled Status. Additionally, if I may direct your attention to the Disciplinary Action section, specifically the columns titled Resolution and Found Issues. From a little cursory reading of state law and associated regulations, this decision is temporary until the full investigation is completed. Once that happens, the Professional Standards Board will decide if there is to be permanent action against her license. If there is, then there will be a date in the Order Signed Date column, and a entertaining link in the Documents column in the Disciplinary Action section that lays out the entire case, from start to finish. I've read a couple of documents in other cases I found where there was a final order. And wow, they lay asterisk EV right thing asterisk out. So there we have it, Reddit. I was almost kinda feeling bad for bringing up stuff from years ago to government agencies, but the fact that she is asterisk still asterisk trying to pull off this crap, albeit without the money part, made any of that evaporate like the HOA she thought she had. So it may be the end, or it may not, but at least for now, we've reached the conclusion of the saga of the harpy of the not really an HOA. Pay Art 4. For those who have read my scribbling on here regarding the harpy of the not really an HOA, hopefully you have enjoyed the saga so far. I am adding this last post on here as a place to put the aftermath of this saga and any updates that I may hear. Because unbelievably, this is a crazy situation that just keeps on giving. When last we left Ms. Harpy, she was being investigated by the State Real Estate Licensing Board, as well as the IRS. Well, I learned something interesting in this whole saga. Apparently, while the statute for limitations for criminal tax evasion is only 3 years, or possibly 6 years, depending on the situation, there is apparently no statute of limitations on how far back they can go in civil court. So while she may dodge any federal charges of tax evasion, the IRS will be crawling up in her business however the heck far they want. I suspect that will end poorly and expensively for her. Additionally, the State Department of Revenue has also caught wind of this. Can't imagine how that may have happened. Similar to the feds, while they can't charge her criminally on the tax evasion, I'm sure they also will be digging through all of her tax records for the last, forever. I've already had an interview with a rather pleasant IRS agent and was able to go through everything that I knew, the timeline for what happened, and how it was that I discovered there was not an actual HOA there. When I explained how this all started because she decided to be a bitch about a couple of relatively small issues, and it has since snowballed into, well, she, the agent, laughed so hard it took us several minutes to get back on track. And she continued to chuckle and giggle throughout the rest of the interview. And the State Department of Revenue has contacted me as well, wanting to set up a time for an in-person meeting. So that will be fun. I've considered going to the local news media about this as some suggested, but decided against it for a couple of reasons. The story isn't really as fresh as it was 7 or so years ago, when it was all going down, and I doubt the news media's ability to keep my name out of it. Maybe not on the air, but somehow it would slip, and that would add needless complication to my life. If somehow she avoids getting her real estate license revoked, maybe that will change the equation enough to where it might be worth letting the media know. Plus it gives them a recent hook to tie the story into. State Real Estate Board refuses to revoke license of crooked agent. News at 11. You get the gist. I don't have the screenshot of it, but on the State Licensing Board website, there's 3 new items in the disciplinary action section of her license, an additional proposed suspension sanction, and 2 proposed revocation sanctions. I'm guessing the second proposed suspension is so she can't default back to a regular real estate agent, and the proposed revocation sanctions are for her principal broker and regular real estate agent licenses as well. So that will be interesting to see what happens once it's finalized. I imagine that process will not be quick. Once I get home tonight and have a chance to redact the relevant information from the screenshot, I'll post that as well. I've heard through my friend who lives in the subdivision that there have been several people contacted by the State Real Estate Board, as well as the State Department of Revenue and the IRS to set up interviews, and some have already been completed. And just out of curiosity, I checked the website for the local branch of the national real estate company she works for, and lo and behold, she's no longer listed on there as either the principal broker or an agent, and someone else is listed as principal broker. I'm going to take this development as a cautious agency making sure they don't get caught up in any legal messes, but I think someone just learned the lesson. You are merely a cog in this machine. You are easily replaced. In a final bit of entertainment for this saga, I was shown several screenshots by my friend of a post in the subdivision's Facebook page that was quite, well, I guess entertaining would be a great word. She's since deleted the post, but essentially she was on there shrieking about how they were all under a non-disclosure agreement, and she was apparently threatening to sue any of them that talked to anyone for violation of the NDA. This was met by cricket chirps from anyone who knew what was going on, but there were several "what the hell is she talking about" type of posts by a few of the newer owners who weren't in the know. But my favorite response was by someone who apparently is an attorney, based on how they phrased things, who wasn't here when the not an HOA was in effect. She's only lived in the neighborhood for about a year, but apparently caught a quick heads up from somebody. The short version of her post was that while she wasn't aware of the particulars of what was going on, she stated that NDAs don't cover someone answering questions from a regulatory or investigatory agency, either state or federal, as well as not covering any testimony being given under oath. And trying to bully someone into not speaking to such an agency by means of an NDA or otherwise might even be considered witness tampering or intimidation. And a few hours later, the Harpy's post and all the associated replies mysteriously disappeared. But you know, FP will gladly hand over the whole conversation with a subpoena. And the IRS does not mess around with the possibility of witness tampering. So maybe she might end up facing criminal charges after all. Depends on how stupid she gets, I guess. If past performance is any kind of indicator, she may very well get to spend some time in the Gray Bar Hotel. And as any more updates come in, I'll add them on as edits to this post, so there's one convenient place to watch for updates. Major UPDAE. See the attached photo. The state real estate agency has finalized their orders on her license. Folks, I wish I could share the text of the final orders associated with this action. But because it is public record, it is also searchable, and would all too easily reveal her identity and open the doors to headaches for me and my family. So I'll summarize. The first revocation for fraud or dishonest conduct and failure to disclose is of her principal broker license. The second revocation, for incompetence or untrustworthiness and records, that's for her regular real estate agent license. There are some bombshells in the final orders. Apparently, as a few people suspected in the comments, there was a lot more happening than just what was happening in her neighborhood. I was shocked at how quickly the final order was released. From what I was seeing in other cases of revocations, the investigation usually lasts anywhere from 3 to 6 months. But reading the final orders, the principal broker revocation was based mostly on the information in the lawsuit that was filed by the neighbors back in 2012 and the ensuing settlement. However, their investigation apparently turned up quite a bit of other stuff, including lying to clients, falsifying records, not disclosing relationship between herself and sellers or buyers, and other instances of outright fraud. I will quote one line nearly verbatim from both final orders, because it's just so delicious to read. While this board has taken the strongest action granted by the APPLICABLD state STHUTES, much of the information that was discovered during the course of this board's investigation is beyond the purview of this board. Therefore, we are turning over all records and witness testimony to the REDACTD County District Attorney and the State or ADACTD Department of Justice, Criminal Justice Division for further action. Folks, the world of legal hurt his woman has brought onto herself just continues to avalanche. This morning, I had walked my daughter to her school bus stop, right on the corner where the not an HOA starts, and an unmarked SUV with government plates comes around the corner. Picture every unmarked law enforcement SUV you've seen in a movie. That's stereotypical. And they park a couple of doors down from the Harpy's house. I risked being a couple minutes late to work to watch what was about to unfold, and was not in the least bit disappointed, because out of the vehicle stepped 2 individuals wearing dark blue jackets with bright yellow letters. Some very specific letters. Big letters that may or may not have spelled out IRS, and underneath in smaller letters the words Special Agent. I may have giggled when I got to my truck. I may have laughed uproariously on my drive into work, because the first thing I did was look up just how big of a poop pile she may have landed in. Apparently, a really deep one. Because from what I could find, the only people authorized to wear the special agent jacket are in the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I texted my friend who lived in the neighborhood this as I was leaving for work around 7:15 this morning. He texted me back around 10-ish. He's been watching all of this unfold out his front window since I texted him. In addition to the original SUV, which is now right in front of her house, there's another SUV there as well. Apparently some other people wearing IRS jackets, just without the special agent, got out of the second SUV, and he just saw them carrying out some banker's boxes sealed with red tape and a couple of computers. And because this poo pile is not yet deep enough, apparently they were checking something. Assuming VIN on the Mercedes SUV she started driving a few months ago. I'll update this as he sends me more info. We're seeing the undoing of the harpy in nearly real time. Oh, how sweet it is.